Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel again, and in this video we are going to discuss about the article 26 of the Indian Constitution that basically talks about the freedom to manage religious affairs. Okay, and as you can see, basically there are four clauses: clause A, clause B, clause C and clause D, and there are certain restrictions have been also given under this article, that is subject to what? The public order, the morality, the health, and it also said that every religious denomination or any section they are set off. Okay, so basically it gives religious denominations the freedom to manage its religious affairs. Okay, so now we will go through each clause one by one. First, let us start with the clause 1, that is clause A. So it says that right of religious denominations to establish and maintain institutions. Okay, so under article 26 clause A, that is basically talks about the rights of religious denomination to establish and maintain institution. Okay, like imagine a group of devotees decided to build a temple. Okay, like some group of devotees, they decided to build a temple. Okay, so they decided to build a temple. So for the construction work, they collect donations, they purchase land, they construct the temple, they appoint the priest, and after that they began conducting the religious activities. Okay, now imagine that after a few years, what happened? The government suddenly says that you cannot, the government suddenly says that after a few years that you can no longer run this temple. We will take over everything. So can the state do that? So to answer this, we have to read what? Article 26 clause A, that is the right of religious denominations to establish and maintain institutions. Okay, so basically article 26 protects the collective right of religious group. What? The collective right of religious group. Okay, and article 26 clause A is specifically giving them the right to establish and maintain institution for religious and charitable purpose. So what does basically established and maintain institutions means? Like, so the first part of the article 26 clause A is the right to establish institution. Basically establish means to create. Okay, for example, a religious denomination may establish a temple, a mosque, a church, a gurudwara. Okay, and the key point here is that the institution must originate from the denomination itself. The constitution recognizes its freedom to create such institutions. And what does maintain institution means? Maintaining institution means that creating an institution is only the beginning. Okay, what happened after the construction? Someone must once you created the institution, what after the construction? Like someone must manage it. Okay, the management, someone must pay the salaries, and someone must conduct the worship, someone must maintain the building. So that is where the second part came in, the right to maintain institution. Maintenance include basically the preserving the institution, managing daily affairs, conducting religious activities, looking after the finances. Okay, the looking after the finances, like employing staff, maintaining property, continuing the charity services. Like, so in simple words, the constitution protect not only the established or birth of an institution, but also its continued existence. And then it also said that it must be for what? It must be for religious purpose and charitable purpose. So for what purposes? It can be for religious purposes and charitable purposes. Okay, so article 26 clause A applies to institution created for religious purposes. That includes what? The worship, the religious education, the religious ceremonies. Okay, for example, a monastery teaching spiritual doctrines or a temple conducting rituals falls within the religious purposes. And the second one is the charitable purpose. So this article also protects institution created for the charitable purpose. Like for charity purpose, for example, the schools, the colleges, the hospitals, the orphanages. Okay, and some like the shelter homes, some relief for the poor. So this shows that the religion under the constitution is not confined only to worship. It can also express itself through the social services and welfare programs. Okay, and the important constitutional principle that was developed by the court is that the word establish and maintain must be read together. Like think about it, like giving a religious denominations the right to right to establish the institutions. Okay, but denying it the right to maintain it would make the first it would make the purpose to establish the institution as meaningless. Okay, therefore the constitution protects both the creation and continued functioning. And then comes a question that can state intervene? This is where many students become confused. Does article 26 clause A means complete immunity from the government regulations? No, the constitution strikes a balance. The state cannot arbitrarily destroy or take away a religious institution. However, the state can regulate the secular aspect of administration. So basically, the state state can regulate the secular aspects. What are secular aspects? So secular aspects of administrations, like for example, the financial accountability, okay, the prevention of corruption, or some like the public safety regulations. So the government may regulate these secular matters if the regulation is constitutionally valid, but it cannot destroy the essential religious autonomy guaranteed under Article 26. Okay, but there comes certain limitations upon this right. Like many fundamental rights, Article 26 clause A is not absolute. What? It is not absolute. Okay. That means there must be some conditions or restrictions. So those reasonable restrictions are what? First one is the public order. What does basically it means? Public order means that the religious activities cannot disturb the peace and law and order. Okay. Whereas the second restriction is the morality. What does morality means? Like if there is a religious practice that is opposite or contrary to the constitutional morality, then the practice can be restricted. Okay, so and the last one, that is the third restriction, is the health. And the health basically means that the activities harmful to public health can be regulated. Okay, thus the religious freedom exists, but it should be within the what? Within the constitution framework. Okay, and there was one famous case, like we can quote it there, that is the TMA Pi Foundation versus the state of Karnataka. Okay, so basically in this case, the Supreme Court emphasizes that the right to establish and maintain institutions belongs to both the majority community as well as to the minority community. The judgment reinforced the principle that the religious and educational institutions enjoy what? The constitutional protection and autonomy, but they are subjected to what? The reasonable regulations. Okay, and those reasonable regulations are the public order, morality and health. So I think we have done with Article 26 Clause A, that protects the collective autonomy of religious denominations by allowing them to create or continue institutions for religious and charitable purpose, and that must be subject to what? The public order, the morality, the health. Now we should move to what? The clause B. So clause B of Article 26, it basically gives the religious denominations what? To manage their own affairs in matters of religion. Okay, so like imagine a century-old temple. Okay, so imagine a century-old temple where particular ritual have been performed every morning for hundreds of years. Okay, some rituals is being performed. Okay, now one day what happened? The government issues an order. What? Issues an order that from tomorrow this ritual will stop and a new method of worship will be introduced. So can the state decide how a religious should pray? Can state should decide? Or so what do you think? Can the state decide how a religion should pray? Can the government tell a religious community which rituals are correct and which are not? So to answer these questions, we have to read the Article 26 Clause B. Okay, so what was there in Article 26? Basically protect the collective right of religious group, and among these collective rights, the Article 26 Clause B grants every religious denominations the right to what? The right to manage its own affair in matter of religions. Okay, so basically who enjoy this right? Basically the beneficiaries are the religious denominations. Like, so Article 26 Clause B says that a religious denomination has what? The freedom to decide its own religious affairs. Freedom to decide its own religious affairs. Okay. In simple words, the state generally cannot become a religious authority. The government may govern the country, but it cannot decide the theological or religious questions. The religious group themselves determine what they believe, how they worship, which ceremony they follow, which traditions they preserve. This is the essence of religious autonomy, basically. Okay, so what are the matters of religions? The matter of religion, this is the most important phrase of this clause B. The matter of religion includes what? Matter of religion includes basically the religious doctrines. Okay, the core teachings and principles of a faith, the articles of faith, that is the fundamental beliefs accepted by the followers, the rituals and ceremonies, that is the religious practices performed during a worship, and it includes it also includes how prayer are conducted, like the mode of worship, and the temple traditions, like the long established customs and practices, the festivals, the religious celebrations and ceremonies. So these all things are considered as religious matter and therefore receives what? The constitutional protection. So what can a religious denomination decide? Let's see what can a religious denomination decides. Okay, so a denomination may decide how worship will be conducted. Okay, which rituals are sacred, which ceremonies are required. So for example, a temple denomination may determine the sequence of rituals. A monastery may determine the qualification for spiritual leadership. Okay, so or a religious order may decide how its ceremonies are performed. So these decisions are generally belongs to a denomination itself. So here, if we see what state ordinarily can do and cannot do. So basically, the state cannot do or cannot interfere with the religious rituals. What? It cannot enter in what? In the religious matters, the essential religious matters, like the religious rituals, the form of worship, the religious doctrines, the sacred ceremonies. So constitution assumes that the religious questions should be answered by the religion itself. Okay, and the government is not a religious expert. Therefore, the court and governments generally avoid deciding the religious truths. But the government can interfere in what? The secular matters. Okay, and this right is not absolute like most fundamental rights. So Article 26 Clause B is subjected to limitations. That is, the state may interfere when the public order is threatened. Okay, if a practice cause violence, disorder, or public disturbance, then state can interfere. If morality is violated, okay, if a practice conflict with the constitutional morality. And the third limitation is what? If health is endangered, that is, if a practice possesses a serious risk to public health. So the state can regulate the secular matters. That is, not everything done by a religious institution is a religious activity. Many activities are secular in nature, and such activities can be regulated. Okay, like the property management, the auditing functions, the employment conditions, the institutional governments. So these can be regulated by the state, but the state cannot regulate the religious matters like the worship, the rituals, the ceremonies, or religious doctrine. So here comes a very important doctrine, that is the doctrine of essential religious practices. Okay, so basically the Supreme Court developed a essential religious practice test, where if a dispute arises, then the court often asks a question, that is the practice essential to the religion. And practice, what? The doctrine of essential religious practice basically tests whether the practice is essential to religion or not. If it is essential, then the practice receives what? A strong constitutional protection. Okay, but if the activity is not essential and it is of what? It is of secular character, then it is not protected under the constitution, and the state may regulate it. Okay, so there was one important case also here. So here also an important case, that is the Shirur Mutt case. It was in 19. Okay, so in this case basically the Supreme Court held that the religions included the belief as well as the practices. The religious denominations has the autonomy in religious matters. The state cannot interfere in essential religious affairs. However, the secular administrations can be regulated. So this judgment becomes what? The foundation of Article 26 jurisprudence. Okay, so after this there was another case, that is the Ratilal Gandhi case, Panachand Gandhi case. It was also in 1954. In this case also the court reaffirmed that the religious group possesses the freedom to conduct and manage their religious affairs, and the judgment strengthens the collective religious liberty under Article 26. So at last Article 26 clause B, the Article 26 clause B protects the collective freedom of a religious community to govern their own religious life. Okay, and it allows the denominations to preserve their beliefs, their rituals, their ceremonies, their traditions, their spiritual identity. At the same time, it permits the state to regulate these secular activities in a large public interest. And the constitutional message is clear that state may regulate the administration, and the constitutional message is clear that the state can regulate or may regulate administration, but it can not ordinarily dictate religion. So Article 26 clause B guaranteed every religious denomination autonomy in matter of religion, while permitting the state regulations of secular activities subject to public order, morality, or health. Okay, now we will move to clause C. So Article 26 clause C, it basically gives the religious denominations to the right to own and acquire property. Okay, so here also we can go through imagine a temple again. Okay, imagine a temple that has existed for 500 years. Okay, it is a 500-year-old temple. Okay, and over generations the devotees donates what? The land, the gold, the money. Okay, so over generations the devotees donate land, gold, money, books, and buildings. One day a question arises: can religious institutions legally own all this property? Can it purchase new land? Can it receive donations? Can it inherit property through bills? Or does the constitution only protects the worship or the rituals? So to answer and to know all these things, we have to read what? The Article 26 clause C. Basically Article 26 protects the religious freedom, but religious freedoms cannot survive without resources. Okay, a temple needs what? A land. A mosque needs a building. A church needs some funds. A Gurudwara needs property to run schools or community kitchen. And this is why the Article 26 clause C grants the religious denominations the right to own and acquire the movable and immovable properties. In simple word, if I conclude, the constitution recognized that the religious institutions needed property to function and survive. So every religious denominations, like for example a Saivite denominations, a Western sects, a Sikh religious institutions, a Christian religious order, a Muslim religious organization, so these rights belongs to the denominations as a collective body. What does Article 26 clause C actually gives? It gives two rights. What? Two rights. The right number one is to own property. Okay. And the right number two is to acquire property. Let us understood both. So to own property means the ownership means what? Having lawful possessions and control over property already belongs to the denominations. And this may includes what? The existing property, the donated property, the trusts for property. For example, a temple may already own land donated century ago. A church may own building constructed through a community contributions. A Gurudwara may own agricultural land supporting the charitable activities. So, Constitution protects such ownership. And the second right, that is to acquire property. The religious institutions are not frozen in time. They may grow and expand. समझिए? मतलब Article 26 clause C also protects the right to acquire new property. The property may be acquired through purchase, like buying land or building, donations, like receiving gifts from devotees, gifts of property, voluntary transferred, or it can be through inheritance, like obtaining through the successions, or somebody may transfer its property like through lawful means. So thus the religious institutions have what? Have the constitutional freedom to expand their property basis. So constitution protects what? Constitution protects what? The movable property as well as the immovable property. So movable property means assets that can be moved from one place to another. जो एक जगह से दूसरी जगह ले जाए जा सके. Like the cash donations, bank deposits, gold and silvers, religious ornaments, sacred artifacts, furniture, vehicles. So these can be moved from one place to another. Like, okay, whereas the immovable properties includes what? It means that the asset permanently attached to the earth. जो मतलब स्थायी है. Like the land, the temple premise, the mosque premise, the church building, the गुरुद्वारा, ये थोड़ी नहीं एक जगह से दूसरी जगह मूव कर सकते हैं. समझ रहे? The mosques, school, hospital, ये सारी चीजें. Like a religious denomination may acquire a land for constructing a school, a hospital, a place of worship. But why does the constitution protect this right? Because property is not merely an economic asset. For religious institutions, property serve several constitutional purposes. Like an institution needs resources to operate without dependence on external control. Or a property help in maintaining the century-old traditions and institutions. A place of worship required a physical infrastructure. So for charitable activities like a school, hospital, orphanages, shelters, need land and building. So Article 26 Clause C protects the material foundation of religious freedom. Thus, this means that state has no power. Like Article 26 Clause C does not place religious property beyond the reach of law. The state can regulate. What? So, state can regulate. Okay, can regulate property through valid law or impose the administrative requirement. Like for example, the government may require audit or transparency in financial administration. Such regulations is generally valid. भाई क्योंकि इतना चंदा इतना डोनेशंस जो ये उसको उसकी ऑडिटिंग और उसकी ट्रांसपेरेंसी भी तो होनी चाहिए. नहीं तो इस चीज़ों का करप्शन और हवाला और इन चीज़ों में भी तो मिसयूज हो सकता है ना. So in simple words, Article 26 Clause C guaranteed every religious denominations the right to own and acquire movable and immovable property, subject to lawful regulations by the states. Okay. So now we will move to our last clause, that is the clause D. So under Article 26 Clause D, it gives what? The right to administer property in accordance with law. Okay, like imagine a famous temple. Okay, imagine a famous temple that is receiving crores of rupees in donations. What? Donations in crores. So what? Donations in crores of rupees. Okay, every year बहुत लाखों करोड़ों का यहाँ पे donations आता है. And the temple owns the land, the building, the gold and charitable institutions. Okay, and the temple owns what? The land, the buildings. Okay, land. But now a very important question arises here, that who will manage it? Who will manage all this property? A religious denomination or a government or both? So to answer this, we have to read what? The clause D of Article 26. Okay. So what we have already seen under Article 26, we have already seen that in clause A, it gives right to what? Right to establish and maintain religious institutions. Okay. In clause B, we have read about the right to manage religious affairs. And in clause C, we read about the right to own and acquire property. But ownership alone is not what enough. Once a denomination owns a property, someone must manage it, and someone must what? Someone must collect donations, someone must maintain building, someone must pay employees, someone may run schools and hospitals, and someone must keep the accounts. Okay, so that is why Article 26 Clause D grants the right to administer such property in accordance with the law, and this provision protects the administrations while allowing the lawful regulations. So every religious denominations. So now we are reading Article 26 Clause D, that is every religious denomination have right to administer, have right to what? To administer property, but in accordance with the law. So administering property includes what? It includes the collection of donations. Okay, like receiving offerings and contributions. The management of what? The management of funds, like handling income and expenditures, or the maintenance of building, like the repairing temple, mosque or church or school or hospitals. The appointment of staff, like recruiting the administrative personnel, or the most important functions, that is the auditing and accounting. Okay, so that is to maintain the financial transparency and to manage the day-to-day management, ensuring that the smooth functioning of the institutions. So in simple words, the administration means running the institution effectively and responsibly, but in accordance with law. That is the state that it expressly states that the administration must be carried out in accordance with the law. This means that right exists, but it is not absolute. The constitution itself permits the lawful regulations. So in accordance with law, what does it mean? That it means that the rights exist, but it is not absolute. The constitution had permitted the lawful regulations, because administrations includes what? The secular activities, like managing money is not a worship, or maintaining account is not a religious rituals, or conducting the auditing and accounting function is not a sacred ceremony. So because the administration basically affects the society at large. Okay, like so administration affects the society at large, therefore the constitutions allow what? Constitution allow state to regulate these secular aspects. So like the state may enact law regarding the financial management and to prevent any sort of corruption or misuse of donations, the auditing, like the examining the account and expenditures, and ensuring that the assets are used for intended purpose, that is the proper utilizations of property, and to prevent any sort of mismanagement, that is to correct the serious administrative failures. Thus, regulations are constitutionally permissible. Okay, so state can regulate these secular aspects, but state cannot do what state cannot do. State cannot destroy the right itself. The government cannot abolish the denominational control. The denomination must remain meaningful authority, and the state cannot permanently take over the institutions. Okay, state cannot destroy the religious autonomy, and state cannot interfere in the essential religious matters. And there are distinctions between the religious and the secular matters. State can regulate or interfere in the secular matter, that is the property management, finance, account, or administrative functions. But state cannot interfere in the religious matters like the rituals, worships, or religious doctrines. Okay, so in simple word, if we see the Article 26 Clause D, Clause D guarantees the religious denominations the right to administer their property while permitting state regulations for secular administration through valid law without extinguishing the denominational control. Okay. So I think we have done with the Article 26. So I think we have done with the Article 26 of the Constitutions. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Actually, I missed one thing. So let's see that. So Article 26 basically it gives every religious denominations the right to establish institutions. What? Establish institutions to manage religious affairs. Okay, to owning property and to what? Administering property. Okay, but before claiming these rights, a group must answer one question: are you a religious denominations? If the answer is yes, then you can claim those special protections. Okay, but if you are not a religious denomination, then you cannot claim those special protections. Therefore, the meaning of religious denominations become extremely important. What does religious denominations means? Okay, so imagine a temple. Okay, imagine a temple says, we are not just a collection of individual devotees. We are distinct religious community. What? A distinct religious community with our own beliefs, traditions, rituals, and spiritual identity. Okay, and the government responds, how do we know you are a separate religious denomination? Who decides? What exactly is a religious denomination under the constitutions? And so the answer lies in the historic Shirur Mutt case that was in 1954. Okay, so what was the story of Shirur Mutt case? So what was the story of Shirur Mutt? So basically in present day Karnataka there exists an ancient religious institution. What? Ancient religious institutions. Okay, that is the Shirur Mutt. Okay, it belonged to a religious traditions within Hinduism. And what happened? The government enacted a legislation. Okay, government enacts a legislation to regulate the Hindu religious institutions and their administration. But the Shirur Mutt challenged these provisions before the Supreme Court. Okay, and the case become this famous Shirur Mutt case. Okay, so the question before the court is what? Supreme Court have to decide what is a religious denomination. Okay, so here in this case, the Supreme Court says that a religious denomination, what does Supreme Court says that a religious denomination is what? Is a collection of individuals who have what? Collection of individuals who have common faith, follows a common organization, and are designated by a what? A distinctive name. Okay, so what? This becomes the famous constitutional test. The three essential elements. So according to the Shirur Mutt judgment, a religious denomination must satisfy these three conditions. That is, the first condition is the common faith. That is, the member must share common religious beliefs. They must subscribe to a particular spiritual doctrine or religious philosophy. Okay, so and the second one is the common organization. That is, a denomination must possess some organizational structure. So there must be an identifiable religious body. For example, there must be a Mutt, a monastic order, a religious sect, a church, organizations, a religious mission. So this organizational framework gives the group the continuity and identity. And the third element, that is the distinctive name. That is, the denomination must be known by a separate and distinctive name. The people should be able to identify the groups as distinct from the others. For example, the Ramanujan Sampradaya, the Saivites, the Vaishnavites. So these names serve as a marker of separate religious identity. Okay. So to qualify to be a religious denominations, there must be a collective group of individuals who possessed a common belief and an organized religious structure and a distinctive identity. Okay, then it can claim protection under Article 26. So now I think we have done with this Article 26 of the Indian Constitutions. So thank you for watching the video. Please do like, share, subscribe. Okay, and bye-bye.